June 5th, 1944, Pas-de-Calais, France. German Lieutenant Hans Weber stands in a concrete bunker overlooking the English Channel. He raises his binoculars and looks across the water toward the coast of England, 22 miles away. What he sees makes his heart race. Tanks, hundreds of them. Sherman tanks lined up in neat rows along the shoreline. Trucks, artillery pieces, landing craft bobbing in the harbors. An entire army preparing to invade. Weber grabs the field telephone and calls his commander. "Sir, I can confirm it. They're massing at Dover. Patton's army, 1st U.S. Army Group. They're coming here." His commander responds immediately. "Hold your position. 15th Army stays at Calais. This is where they'll attack." The next morning, June 6, 1944, 150,000 Allied troops storm the beaches of Normandy, 190 miles west of Calais. Patton isn't at Dover. He's in England, waiting. The tanks Weber saw aren't real. They're rubber, inflatable, 70 pounds each. The entire army is fake. And the deception will keep 15 German divisions pinned at Calais for 7 weeks while the real invasion succeeds. This is the story of the greatest military deception in history. The story of 23 artists, sound engineers, and actors who built a ghost army. The story of how rubber tanks and radio tricks saved D-Day. This is Operation Fortitude.
Let's start with the problem. By early 1944, everyone knew the Allies were coming. The only question was where. The Germans knew an invasion was inevitable. They'd been preparing for 2 years. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel commanded Army Group B, responsible for defending the French coast. He had 58 divisions spread across hundreds of miles of coastline. But he couldn't defend everywhere equally. He had to guess where the Allies would land. The logical answer was Pas-de-Calais. It was the shortest distance from England to France, 22 miles. Dover to Calais, a straight shot. Landing at Calais meant shorter supply lines, faster reinforcement, and a direct route to Germany. Every piece of logic pointed to Calais. Hitler agreed. He ordered Rommel to concentrate the strongest defenses at Calais. 15th Army, the most powerful German force in France, sat at Calais waiting. Meanwhile, the Allies had chosen Normandy. It was farther, the crossing was longer, the beaches were more heavily fortified in some areas. But Normandy offered strategic advantages. Better ports once captured, room to maneuver, and most importantly, the Germans didn't expect it. But there was a problem. If the Germans figured out the real target and moved 15th Army from Calais to Normandy before D-Day, the invasion would fail. The Allies needed time. They needed the Germans to keep their forces at Calais even after the Normandy landings began. They needed to sell the lie so convincingly that the Germans would believe Normandy was a diversion and the real attack was still coming at Calais. That's where the Ghost Army came in. In January 1944, the U.S. Army activated a new unit, 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. On paper, it was a support unit, administrative, boring. In reality, it was the most unusual military unit ever created. Its roster included artists from New York ad agencies, sound engineers from Hollywood studios, actors from Broadway, radio operators, and a handful of combat engineers. 1,100 men total. Their mission was classified at the highest level. They were going to build a fake army. Not a small fake unit, an entire fake army. Fake tanks, fake trucks, fake artillery, fake airfields, fake everything. And they were going to make it so convincing that German reconnaissance would believe it was real. The man in charge of the technical side was Colonel Hilton Rayleigh, a former advertising executive. He recruited designers, painters, and engineers who understood illusion. The chief engineer was a man named Ralph Ingersoll, who'd worked in theater set design before the war. Their first task was to create inflatable equipment. Real tanks weighed 33 tons. Moving them required transporters, fuel, and logistics. The 23rd Special Troops needed tanks they could carry by hand. Engineers at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company designed inflatable tanks made of rubberized canvas. Each one weighed 70 pounds. Deflated, it fit into a duffel bag. Inflated, it looked exactly like a Sherman tank from more than 100 yards away. They created inflatable trucks, jeeps, artillery pieces, and even fake airplanes. 4 men could set up an entire tank company in 2 hours. A real tank company took days to deploy and required hundreds of support personnel. But visual deception wasn't enough. The Germans had excellent reconnaissance. Their planes flew over England constantly, taking photos. Their spies reported troop movements. If the fake army didn't sound real, the deception would fail. That's where the sound engineers came in. A team led by Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Simonson, a sound engineer from Bell Labs, developed sonic deception equipment. They recorded the sounds of real military operations: tanks starting up, engines idling, trucks moving in convoy, artillery being moved. They recorded everything. Then they built massive speakers, each one mounted on a half-track vehicle. These speakers could project sound up to 15 miles away. At night, when German listening posts were most active, the 23rd would park these half-tracks near the front lines and play recordings of tank battalions moving into position. The Germans would hear hundreds of tanks. In reality, there were none, just speakers in the dark. The third element was radio deception. Every military unit generates radio traffic, orders, supply requests, status reports. German signals intelligence listened to Allied radio constantly, tracking units by their communication patterns. The 23rd Special Troops had radio operators who could mimic entire divisions. They created fake call signs, sent fake messages, simulated the radio signature of a corps headquarters. To German signals intelligence, it looked like a massive American army was operating in a specific area. In reality, it was 3 guys in a tent with radios. Visual deception, sonic deception, radio deception. Combined, they created the illusion of entire armies where none existed, and the Germans bought it. The centerpiece of the deception was Operation Fortitude South. The goal was to convince the Germans that the main Allied invasion force was assembling in southeast England, directly across from Calais, and that it would be commanded by General George S. Patton. Why Patton? Because the Germans feared him more than any other Allied commander. After his success in North Africa and Sicily, German intelligence considered Patton the Allies' best general. Wherever Patton went, the main attack would follow. The Allies knew this, so they gave Patton command of a fake army, 1st U.S. Army Group, FUSAG. On paper, FUSAG was enormous, 12 divisions, over 1 million men, the largest Allied force in Britain. In reality, FUSAG didn't exist, it was a phantom. But the 23rd Special Troops made it look real. They set up fake headquarters in Kent, southeast England, directly across from Calais. They inflated hundreds of rubber tanks and parked them in fields where German reconnaissance planes could photograph them. They built fake landing craft in harbors, wooden frames covered with canvas, floating in the water, looking exactly like the real thing from the air. They created fake supply dumps, stacks of empty crates, arranged to look like ammunition and fuel. They painted fake unit insignia on buildings. They had officers in fake uniforms drive around in staff cars, making sure they were seen in local towns. Everything about FUSAG looked real, and the Germans were watching. Their reconnaissance planes photographed the buildup. Their spies reported Patton's presence in Kent. Their signals intelligence tracked FUSAG's radio traffic. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. Patton was commanding a massive force preparing to attack Calais. But the most critical piece of the deception wasn't the rubber tanks or the radio traffic. It was a Spanish man living in Lisbon named Juan Puyol Garcia, codename Garbo. Garbo was a double agent. The Germans thought he was their best spy in Britain. The British were running him, and he was feeding the Germans exactly what the Allies wanted them to believe. Garbo had convinced the Germans he'd recruited a network of sub-agents across Britain. In reality, all of Garbo's agents were fictional. He made them up. But the intelligence he sent to Germany was so detailed, so accurate, that the Germans trusted him completely. Starting in early 1944, Garbo began sending reports about Fusag. He described troop movements in Kent. He provided details about units, equipment, and supply shipments. He confirmed Patton's presence. Everything Garbo reported matched what German reconnaissance was seeing. The inflatable tanks, the fake bases, the radio traffic, it all lined up. The British fed Garbo real information mixed with lies, just enough truth to make the lies believable. By May 1944, German intelligence was convinced. Fusag was real, Patton was commanding it, and the main invasion would hit Calais. Hitler agreed. He ordered Rommel to keep 15th Army at Calais. Don't move those divisions. The real attack is coming there. On June 6, 1944, at 06:30 in the morning, Allied forces hit the beaches of Normandy. The Germans were caught off guard. But even then, the deception held. Garbo sent an urgent message to German intelligence. Normandy is a diversion. Patton's army is still in Kent. The real attack is coming at Calais. The Germans believed him. 15th Army stayed at Calais. 15 divisions, over 200,000 men, sitting in bunkers, waiting for an attack that would never come. Let's talk about what that meant. On D-Day, the Allies landed 150,000 troops in Normandy. They faced fierce resistance. The fighting was brutal. Omaha Beach was a bloodbath. American troops were pinned down under heavy German fire. If 15th Army had moved from Calais to Normandy on June 6th, the invasion might have failed. But 15th Army stayed at Calais. For 7 weeks after D-Day, those 15 divisions sat there, waiting for Patton. They didn't move until late July, when it was too late. By then, the Allies had secured Normandy and were breaking out into France. The Ghost Army had done its job. It had bought the Allies the time they needed. It had kept the Germans paralyzed by indecision, and it had saved thousands of American and British lives. But the 23rd Special Troops weren't done. After D-Day, they moved to France. Their mission evolved. They began using their deception techniques to confuse the Germans about Allied strength and intentions throughout the European campaign. In September 1944, before Operation Market Garden, the 23rd created a fake buildup near the Belgian border, convincing the Germans that the Allies were preparing to attack there. In reality, the attack came farther north. In October, they simulated the presence of the 9th Army in one location, while the real 9th Army moved into position elsewhere. The 23rd conducted over 20 deception operations in Europe, each one designed to mislead, confuse, and misdirect German forces. And it worked. German intelligence consistently overestimated Allied strength. They believed the Allies had twice as many divisions as they actually did. That belief affected every decision they made. It spread their forces thin. It made them hesitate. It cost them the war. Here's what the Germans said after the war. In 1946, Allied interrogators questioned German commanders about Operation Fortitude and the Phantom Fusag. General Alfred Jold, chief of the operations staff of the German armed forces, said in his interrogation, "We were convinced that Patton commanded the main invasion force. Every piece of intelligence confirmed it. When Normandy was attacked, we believed it was a diversion. We waited for Patton at Calais. We waited too long." Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Commander-in-Chief West, said, "The deception was perfect. We saw the tanks. We heard the radio traffic. Our agents confirmed Patton's location. We never suspected it was fake, not until weeks after Normandy, when it was too late. Colonel Friedrich Adolf Kremacher, head of intelligence for the German Armed Forces High Command, said, "Your intelligence services were superior to ours in every way. You fed us information that matched what our reconnaissance saw. We had no reason to doubt. By the time we realized FUSAG didn't exist, the war was already lost." That's the enemy admitting defeat, not because they were outfought, but because they were outsmarted. The Ghost Army had won a battle without firing a shot. Now let's talk about the cost. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops cost the U.S. Army approximately $3 million to equip and operate for the entire war. $3 million. That bought 1,100 men, inflatable tanks, sound equipment, and radio gear. Compare that to the cost of a single infantry division, $15 million, or a battleship, $100 million. For $3 million, the 23rd Special Troops deceived the Germans into keeping 15 divisions out of the fight for 7 weeks. Those 15 divisions represented over 200,000 men, thousands of tanks, artillery pieces, and aircraft. If they'd been at Normandy on D-Day, American casualties would have been catastrophic. Instead, the deception worked. And it worked because the 23rd understood something fundamental about warfare. The enemy can only react to what they think is real. Let me tell you one story that shows how the 23rd operated in the field. March 1945, Luxembourg. The Allies were preparing to cross the Rhine River, the last natural barrier before Germany. The plan was to concentrate forces near Mainz and strike across the river there. But the 23rd Special Troops had a different job. They were going to make the Germans think the attack was coming 50 miles north near Koblenz. The 23rd moved into position near Koblenz with their inflatable tanks, sound trucks, and radio equipment. They set up fake artillery positions. They inflated an entire armored division. They played recordings of tank movements at night. Their radio operators simulated the communications of 2 full divisions preparing for an assault. German reconnaissance spotted the buildup. Their listening posts heard the tanks. Their signals intelligence tracked the radio traffic. They moved reinforcements to Koblenz. On March 22nd, the real Allied assault hit Mainz. The Germans were caught off guard. Their reserves were in the wrong place. The Allies crossed the Rhine with minimal resistance. The 23rd had done it again. But this time, there was a cost. German artillery spotted the fake positions near Koblenz and opened fire. Real shells falling on fake tanks. Several men from the 23rd were wounded. One was killed. Private First Class Edward Blow, a set designer from Philadelphia, was hit by shrapnel while inflating a rubber tank. He died doing what artists do, creating illusion, making people believe in something that wasn't real. The 23rd suffered relatively few casualties during the war. Most of their operations kept them behind the front lines, but they were still in combat zones. They still faced danger, and they still paid the price. By May 1945, the war in Europe was over. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops had conducted 21 deception operations across France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany. They'd simulated the presence of over 30,000 troops using 1,100 men. They'd confused German intelligence at every turn, and they'd saved countless lives. After the war, the unit was quietly disbanded. The men went home. Most of them never told anyone what they'd done. The entire operation was classified top secret. The Army didn't want potential enemies to know about the Ghost Army's techniques. For 50 years, Operation Fortitude and the 23rd Special Troops remained secret. Declassification didn't begin until 1996. By then, most of the men who'd served in the unit were elderly or dead. When the story finally came out, historians were stunned. One of the most critical operations of World War II had been hidden for half a century. Rick Bayer, a filmmaker who documented the 23rd story, interviewed surviving members in the early 2000s. One veteran, George Vandersloot, said, "We knew we were doing something important, But we never imagined it would stay secret for 50 years. I went my whole life not being able to tell my kids what I did in the war. Now they know. I helped fool Hitler. Another veteran, Bill Blass, who later became a famous fashion designer, said, "The 23rd taught me that creativity wins wars. Not just firepower, not just courage, creativity. The ability to make people see what you want them to see." That's the legacy of the Ghost Army. They proved that deception is a weapon, and in the right hands, it's as powerful as any tank or bomb. Let's connect this to the bigger picture. Operation Fortitude wasn't just about D-Day. It was part of a larger philosophy that defined the Allied war effort. Use every advantage: technology, deception, logistics, intelligence. The Germans were brave. They were disciplined. Their equipment was often better than Allied equipment. But they were fighting an enemy that thought differently. The Allies didn't just try to outfight the Germans. They tried to outsmart them. The proximity fuse made anti-aircraft fire 10 times more effective. The Liberty ships flooded the Atlantic with cargo faster than U-boats could sink them. The code breakers at Bletchley Park read German communications. And the 23rd Special Troops made the Germans see armies that didn't exist. Every one of these advantages required creativity. Engineers solving problems, scientists inventing new technology, intelligence officers running double agents, artists building illusions. The Germans relied on discipline and doctrine. The Allies relied on innovation, and that's why the Allies won. Operation Fortitude also showed the importance of inter-service cooperation. The 23rd worked with British intelligence, the OSS, the Army Air Corps, and Navy intelligence. Information flowed between agencies. Everyone was working toward the same goal. Contrast that with the German military, where rivalries between the Wehrmacht, Luftwaffe, and SS often led to poor coordination. The Allies had their problems too, but when it mattered, they worked together. And that cooperation amplified the effectiveness of operations like Fortitude. Here's one more story. After the war, Allied intelligence officers interviewed a captured German officer named Colonel Alexis von Rohn. He'd been the head of Foreign Armies West, the German intelligence unit responsible for tracking Allied forces. Von Rohn was asked how he'd been so thoroughly deceived by Operation Fortitude. He said, "Every piece of intelligence we received confirmed Fusag's existence. Our aerial reconnaissance photographed the tanks and landing craft. Our listening posts heard the tank movements. Our best agent, Garbo, reported Patton's presence and provided detailed information about Fusag's strength. Everything matched. We had no reason to doubt." The interrogator asked, "When did you realize Fusag was fake?" Von Rohn replied, "Not until August 1944, 2 months after D-Day. We kept waiting for Patton to attack Calais. When he finally appeared in Normandy, commanding 3rd Army, we realized we'd been tricked. By then, it didn't matter. The war was already lost." Think about that. 2 months. The Germans believed in the Ghost Army for 2 months after D-Day. That's not just good deception. That's perfect deception. And it was possible because every element reinforced the others. The visual deception matched the sonic deception. The radio traffic matched the intelligence reports. The double agents confirmed what reconnaissance was seeing. It was a seamless lie, and the Germans bought it completely. Von Rohn would later say in his memoirs, published posthumously, "The Allies didn't just defeat us militarily, they defeated us intellectually. They understood our thinking better than we understood theirs. That was the real weapon." Fast forward to today. The legacy of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops lives on. Modern military deception is a standard part of doctrine. Every major military in the world studies Operation Fortitude. The techniques developed by the 23rd, visual deception, sonic deception, electronic deception, are still used. In 1991, during the Gulf War, U.S. forces used decoy tanks and fake radio traffic to convince Iraqi forces that the main attack was coming from the south. The real attack came from the west. In 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, deception operations made Iraqi forces believe coalition forces were weaker and in different positions than they actually were. Every modern conflict involves deception, and it all traces back to the Ghost Army. In 2019, the Congressional Gold Medal was awarded to the surviving members of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Only a handful of them were still alive. They received their medals 75 years after D-Day. At the ceremony, one veteran, Bernard Bluestein, said, "We didn't do it for medals. We did it because it needed to be done, and we're just glad people finally know the story." That's the story of the Ghost Army. 1,100 men who built fake tanks, played fake sounds, and sent fake radio messages. 1,100 men who convinced Hitler that an army of 1,000,000 men was waiting at Calais. 1,100 men who saved D-Day. Not with guns, not with bombs, but with rubber, speakers, and radios. They proved that the most powerful weapon in war isn't always the biggest or the deadliest. Sometimes it's the one the enemy never sees coming. Here's the final truth. Wars are won by soldiers, but they're also won by thinkers, by people who see problems differently, by engineers who build inflatable tanks, by sound designers who record fake armies, by intelligence officers who run double agents, by artists who paint illusions. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops were all of those things. They weren't frontline infantry, they weren't tank crews or pilots, but they changed the course of the war as much as anyone who landed on Omaha Beach, because they understood something simple but profound. War isn't just about destroying the enemy, it's about controlling what the enemy believes. Make them believe you're somewhere you're not. Make them believe you're stronger than you are. Make them believe the real attack is coming somewhere else. And when they move to counter the threat they think is real, hit them where they're weak. That's what the Ghost Army did. They made Hitler believe in a lie, and that lie won the war. 4 miles offshore from Normandy, on the morning of June 6, 1944, thousands of American soldiers climbed into landing craft and headed for the beach. They didn't know about FUSAG. They didn't know about the inflatable tanks at Dover. They didn't know about Garbo or the 23rd Special Troops. All they knew was that they had a job to do. And thanks to 1,100 men with rubber tanks and radios, 15 German divisions were sitting at Calais, waiting for an army that would never come. That's the legacy of the Ghost Army. Not just that they deceived the enemy, but that their deception gave real soldiers a fighting chance. Remember them.